Welcome to the Friday Power Lunch, a weekly show amplifying the voices of the Virginia grassroots. Each week, we provide engaging conversations about politics, culture, and women making change. Produced by the unstoppable women of Network Nova, our motto is, when we vote, we win. The Friday Power Lunch is recorded before a live Zoom audience. The Friday Power Lunch, badass women getting things done.
All righty. Hey, it is January 30th. We're on almost the last day of January, and you are on the Friday Power Lunch. Welcome, everybody. I would like to make sure that we warm the room up even more with Fennell Norton. How are you doing, Fennell?
I am doing great, Catherine, and the room is warm today. There
Yes.
is so much good stuff to talk about, and I can't wait to hear you talk about the song that we're going to open with today because it's pretty
Well,
fantastic.
you're right. We're going to keep things hot because there's so much damn snow out here. And I know I got to say, first of all, before you even dance in, there's so much to talk about that I'm going to have a hard time focusing today, but we will try. And I was, we were going to dance into obviously the title of the show, Don't Let the
Hmm.
Bastards Get You Down. We are keeping that vibe, but I always like to pivot. That's why what we do very
That's
well.
right.
And yeah, and a lover of Bruce Springsteen, grew up, listening to some of those songs. When he pivoted with this song in reaction to what's happening to our country with the streets of Minneapolis, I couldn't think of a better a song to open up with. And I wanted, put a little bit of a warning on this. It's a great song. It's going to be an anthem for the ages. Okay, so an inflection point that is, and very powerful.
So, this is what I saw lots of things in the chat and people
Yes, I
feeling
did.
depressed and sad and all of that. But what I'd like to say is it is an inflection point or maybe one of many. But what I want people to feel really good about is all the things that are happening are exactly the ways that you fight against this kind of regime. And folks will have to feel good about picking a lane about where they want to reside. It's sustained protests. We see that happen in all communities, big and small. They must be nonviolent. And now we have culture coming in. We've got this song that's an anthem. We've got the NBA. We've got basketball players and football players speaking out. Martha Stewart, Glenn Close, with really powerful statements. And so all of the right things are happening. Direct messages, impeach Noam. This is what's happening. So we can feel good and heartened inside of our sadness that we are doing the things that we must be doing.
I agree, and I think we're going to have to do both at the same time. And I'm so grateful. Representative James Walkinshaw is here. Last night he held a vigil, and a lot of people attended in Reston, Virginia. I'm sure in this room in the chat, I see people are already sharing what they're doing, and I think this is why it's so important. We have to put this always in front of people every day. And I do think that one thing, because man, there is a list of shit I can go through today that's disturbing me. That little boy, Liam, we saw what he looked
Hmm.
like yesterday when Representative Castro visited him. And as a person, all of us that know kids, there's something really wrong with what our government is doing to people and what the killing there, but we have thousands of people locked up, due process, invading our homes. We're way past the red line, as we say. So, there's going to be just really important that we not only talk about it, but we talk about where we're going. Like, we have to also, I'm always concerned that we'll talk so much about, like, oh, let's defund it, without saying exactly why this government is just corrupt, that what it's doing across the world and nationally, what it's doing to America. And I think we have to constantly say what it should be and what we're going to do when we take over, so people know what we need this direction to take back power. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It's both things. We can walk and chew gum at the same time.
Yeah.
We have to do all of these things. But I just never want us to forget that the culture piece really is also the big piece. And it's
Yes,
also the big piece to really be courageous about sharing this with friends and family, because we keep on thinking that they know what's happening, where many of the places that they get the news is completely the opposite, or they don't watch it at all, but they will take it from trusted
right,
sources. So thinking about whether it's posting or emailing or
right.
tagging or whatever, this is the kind of stuff that moves people and causes them to switch sides. When we've seen Republican person who's running for governor say, I can't run under this. We've
Right.
seen as people give speeches about, they've been staunch Republicans. Now, at the same time, there's some of them who are just standing on this bridge and they just won't come off. We can't help them. But there
Yeah.
are plenty of people, whether they have been disengaged, whether they're exhausted, whether they're confused. We have so much work to do to make sure that these people understand what's happening by making all this stuff public.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially since we all know, surrounding all of this activity is the midterms and where we're going to just rein in this regime, is that this from the different ways that they have already leveraged voting or attacking voting, Pam Bondi asking Minnesota, give us your voter file. We have to see through what's happening. And so really concentrate on those safeguards, the institutional stuff that could really happen and what we need to do, because they do not want to lose in the fall, and they will make sure they do everything they can. And when we see Fulton County, the raid there and the rise of political violence, this is all about them wanting to hold power, and we shouldn't turn away from that or not understand what's happening there. And I'm so excited that we have our guests here, and I'm going to introduce them, because one thing that Mary Noon is here. It's great that she's in the room, and Amy Courtney from Mad Voters. But let me just say first, before I officially introduce them, we came away from our discussion saying we cannot keep returning to a time that does not exist. And with
That's right.
that, I want to keep that in our minds, because that's a lot of conversations that we're going to have about today. We also will talk about the Yes campaign, and this is why we wanted to set up Indiana. Last week, we talked about saying yes, the campaign, the way Virginia could fight back against tyranny. And what we had already booked was Indiana, because man, the Indiana Hoosier grassroots and voters stood up to the regime as well. And what we are saying is every state has to go at it for their way that they can fight back. So it's going to be interesting, because we're going to talk to a team that actually, if we know the Indiana story, fought back against that. And we're going to learn from them, right? I mean, they have
Yeah,
some
fight the
great,
fight you're in.
yeah, fight
Fight
the
the
fight you're
fight you're
in.
in.
California, Indiana, bring it on. We're going to learn. So I'm going to say to everybody, welcome. You're on the Friday Power Lunch. It is January 30th. You're in the best place ever. Great community. We're glad you're here. We're hosts bringing you all the conversation and action across Virginia and across the nation. Remember, if you're new, welcome. We're so glad you're here. We have a Substack you can subscribe to. We have a Patreon you can be part of. That helps us fund our show. We love our patrons. Thank you for putting money in our cup every week. It's awesome. But if we also participate in the chat, we don't close it down. If you're nasty, we just kick you out, because we're the bouncers. We got our bouncers up there. So we're glad for that. And I want to say that, yeah, we have an after chat after 1 o'clock. So stay tuned for that. And then thank you to our latest patrons. We just love our January patrons. We love our December. We love our February. We love everybody. So Susan Jacobson came in as a believer. Thank you, Susan. So great that you're here with us. And let's get to saying hello to our guest. Representative James Walkinshaw is here. He's a congressperson in Virginia in the 11th district. We also have Amy Courtney, executive director, Mad Voters. And I am so excited she's here, because this is such a good story about why they formed and what was so necessary to get voters engaged. And Mary Noon. Yeah, strategy is the most important thing. How do you keep that mic hot when you want your voters and your citizens to understand what's going on? Political strategist and digital comms pro. We're so grateful she's in the room. So, woo, lots of words, girl.
Yeah, lots, but that's okay. Hang with us.
Hang with us. Let's go. So, I'll see you in a bit for now. You can go get your tea warmed up, or I bring up
Mhm.
James Walkinshaw. Like I said, I'm excited to have an update on what Democrats are doing in Congress and all that. But I want to start first with saying warm hello to you, Congressman. Could I say that to you? It's still so exciting that you are our representative, because you are a fighter. Let's start with what's on your mind. Last night you had a vigil. and then also your trip to Minnesota. Let's start there first.
Yeah, so last night in Reston at the United Christian Parish Church, we brought together, I didn't get the exact count, 600 people with faith leaders and community leaders and nonprofit leaders. And I wanted to bring people together because I just feel like we all have a lot of mourning and grief and anger and all kinds of things that we're processing, and we can do that better together. It was a really powerful evening. And the other purpose I had is you all were talking about this as an inflection point. I think that's really true. And what's happened in Minnesota, especially with Renee Good and Alex Preti, is one of those rare things that breaks through beyond all the folks on this meeting who pay very close attention to politics and government and the
Right.
Trump administration, right? And it's breaking through in a much wider way, including to people who voted for Donald Trump because they believed he would bring down inflation or they were upset about what was taking place at the border. So there's an opportunity for us here to bring some of those folks into the fold and to communicate
Yeah.
and stress that this is a moral moment. It's not about Democrats, it's not about Republicans, it's not about political battles. It's a moral moment for all Americans, and that's what we tried to do last night.
Well, and in that moral moment, which I agree, and I feel like we've been this past, year really watching these moral moments keep unfolding, that we almost forget like what's happened last week. I mean, we can name just everything we saw that seems to be should have been an inflection point, but here we are when we really see it. You're right. We do have to get on that. Let's move to the elected part of this. Like when you went to Minnesota, it really showed me that you're really understanding what this moment needs. And I'd like to understand what you saw there. But I also I want to make sure that as you're in this elected role, that other leaders are seeing this. I'm a little disheartened by some people really not getting that this is a moral moment. We saw the Tom Suozzi vote, for instance, right away before Alex Preddy was killed. And we're getting, this is the kind of leadership we don't need right now, right? We need leaders like yourself going to Minnesota, really bringing the alarm up and not just talking about, well, it's just all about funding. Let's fund better. No, this is this is really an attack by an authoritarian regime against people. And we need to really figure out how to fight back. So with all that said, what is on your mind? I mean, you went to Minnesota, and that what kind of leaders we should really expect from our Democratic, group, as we say.
Yeah, I wanted to go to Minnesota. I wanted to support my colleagues in Minnesota, Ilhan Omar and others
Right.
whose, communities are really under attack. And honestly, there was a part of me who felt like, as a white male Democrat,
Mhm.
I especially needed to be there to show my support to my colleagues and folks in that community who are being targeted because of their race or ethnicity or background, including the Somali community in
Yes.
Minnesota. And what was powerful to me was to hear firsthand from Minnesotans about what they're experiencing, right? It's one thing to watch the videos and see it on
Right.
social media, but to hear from people that they've had to close their businesses, their schools are closed, they're hiding in their homes, including American citizens hiding in their homes because they didn't want to be beaten or dragged or shot dead in the streets. It was really powerful to hear that firsthand from people and bring those stories back to the rest of my colleagues in Congress.
I think that's important in what you said. Like I looked at some of your comments in the public saying that you're warning MAGA that you will demand accountability. I like that kind of, rhetoric or talk or whatever, because I think we need to understand that these people will have to be held accountable. I think you've been really strong on that. But going back to the colleagues or how you're working around this, like talking about a plan, and I think maybe you're also frustrated like I am to really see this in a larger context. What you just described, people hiding in their house, people being dragged out, people being kidnapped. We see in Virginia, what was great, we had a success in Hanover. Activists and citizens
Mhm.
rose up to stop a concentration camp right off of 95. But Hagerstown, Maryland, they were able to sell one to Homeland Security. We're not sure where that'll go. But so we see them building this really nasty empire around us. but we're in a conversation in the government, almost like this same thing, like government shutdown. Well, this kind of funding you're allowed. But what are we funding really when we're funding this government?
Well, I think one thing that's really important to tell our friends and neighbors and Americans, especially maybe those who voted for Donald Trump, who we need to win back in some parts of the
Right?
country, all of this is being funded, right? The facilities you talked about, the ICE and CBP and federal agents that are in Minnesota, all of the equipment, all of the technology, millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars is funded by healthcare cuts.
Yes.
So right now, if Americans who are experiencing higher healthcare costs, higher premiums, one of the reasons for that is the Republicans and Trump took the money out of your healthcare and put it into this brutal mass deportation, mass destruction regime. And even if you're someone who felt like maybe Joe Biden didn't do a good enough job on the border, I don't think you signed up to have your
Right.
healthcare cut so people could be shot in the streets of Minnesota. And that's what's happened.
Yeah, I mean, I know the grassroots We're Reacting Indivisible will have this big march, March 28th. I'll just do the call out today. There's sort of a national strike. But people, I've heard pundits like Danielle Moody really talk about in this moment when you see it so serious, we really need more of a national strike, more of a real economic shutdown. And there is those kind of things that maybe the people can do. But in the sense of what you guys are thinking about, for instance, what you just said, the funding and what we're talking about, what a lot of people feel like this global war on terror, because we see this as a global happening as well,
Hmm.
that our government is using those tools against its citizens. They're taking this equipment that's been made to chase terrorists. We see Palantir, who has all this sort of spy technology, turning it on the streets where police are using it for face technology. This is really intertwined when you kind of sit back from it and saying, they are testing in Minneapolis what works. These billionaire techs are using their products to track us through Signal, to find us, to scare us. And there's no constraint. Like when you said about this ICE funding, tell us what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, because how do we make sure that no one's going to break in our house or a window or drag us away? I don't see that going on. Like, how do we stop that?
Yeah, look, one reality is that ICE and CBP and these agencies are fully funded for the foreseeable future because of that big ugly bill that took money
Right,
out of healthcare and gave tax cuts to the wealthiest and funded these agencies. We do have an opportunity in this moment, especially when the country is paying attention, the country is on our side. We have
right.
an opportunity to secure some protections that can rein in some of the lawlessness. It's not going to shut it all down. It's not going to end it. It's not going to stop it, but we can put some safeguards on it. And my view is we have to do that as quickly as possible for two reasons. One, the threat is urgent, right? We can't afford to wait and have somebody else killed in the
Yes,
streets. Two, the Republicans and Trump are buying for time. They are betting that a week from now, 10 days from now, 2 weeks from now, the American people will have moved on to
right.
the next controversy, and this will have faded into the recesses of their mind, and the pressure on Trump, the pressure on Nome, the pressure on Republican Congress will have been reduced. So we have to act now and secure those protections. And I'm not going to support any funding for DHS that doesn't include them.
Yeah. And Fidel, use some last words because I know we
Yeah,
have to.
I do, and you don't have to answer the question, but it's really something that I've been thinking about, and that is that this is a moment that most of us have never ever seen before, that our democracy is plunging away. And what I hear from people is it doesn't, we always hear no one's coming to save us. But quite frankly, I think that our people that we voted for should be coming to save us, that they should have a greater influence on what's happening. And so I haven't seen a social media campaign that really speaks to authoritarianism and what it is and what harm it does.
Good
And so
idea.
I get requests every day, dollars from Congress people all over the country. And I would just like to see something put into a national message. If we are in an existential crisis for our life, then I think that there should be some consistent messaging that comes from our Congress and from our Senate to all American people to say, this is the fight that we're in. It's not a fight that most of this generation has never seen before. And the House is on fire, but it doesn't feel like that people are seeing and our Congress is seeing, and that money is being used to help save the country. So
Yeah.
that's what I hear, that's what I feel, and I just wanted to be sure that you heard that from me.
I love it. That's our
Thank
message,
you.
the PR campaign. And I think what we talk about behind the scenes is most important than what we're going to talk about today is how you do keep the mic hot,
Mm.
James, how you penetrate the news. But I think that if we can get a big message out to the people, I think it'd be like very, very important at this time. And so I want to thank you for your time. I have a ton of questions. I'm going to have you come back for the hour because I know I want to just say this. We do know the SAVE Act, they're gonna not want this election to happen. These different barriers, they want voting roll stuff. So I hope I can have you back to maybe we could talk about a strategy. Does that sound like something you?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that should be talked about more with respect to Minnesota is the letter Kristi Noem sent to Minnesota saying, turn over your voting rolls.
Yeah.
The
We
gun to their Minnesota's
Yes.
head, turn over the voting
Yeah,
rolls,
turn it. That's
continue to
what
pull
they
the
want.
trigger.
And look at Tulsi Gabbard in Fulton taking the stuff there. So Senator Warner talked about this. They're worried about ICE doing more and scaring people. So we'll have you back. And if there's any questions, I'll send them along to you and maybe you can answer if for some feedback. Thank you so much, Congressman.
Yeah, we're
Thank
really
you.
Have you in
grateful
the
for
room.
you. Thank you.
Yeah. Have a good
Yeah.
day.
Bye-bye. I can't think of a better song to play. Don't let the bastards get you down, because after all that, folks, we need a little bit of an intro to Amy Courtney from Mad Voters executive director, who said she doesn't let the bastards get her down, and the kind of work she did to get people civically engaged. So Dennis, if you want to cue that up, let's do it.
Don't let the bastards get you down, Margot Price.
It is so great to be here. The first thing I want to do is thank the whole Friday Power Lunch team for welcoming me so warmly into their midst. It has been such a pleasure and a privilege to work with you all. I come to you by way of Swing Blue Alliance, which is out of Boston. I have them to thank for my introduction to all of you. But I am an Indiana grassroots organizer, and I started my work outside of Indiana before I got into the good fight in Indiana. And we are fighting the good fight against all odds. And so often, what you hear come out of Indiana is not much of anything but bad news. But my God, we made international news by 8 o'clock in the evening the day we voted against redistricting here in Indiana. So I want to introduce Courtney. I'm sorry, Amy Courtney. I know a Courtney, so I always want to say Courtney. Amy Courtney from Mad Voters, which means Mutually Assured Democracy. She was a huge part of how this all happened, and so was Mad Voters. And Amy, thank you.
I love it. And yes, thank you, Lori, so much for introducing. And I love the song. I have to say that I love country music as well as rock and roll and punk. So it was perfect to introduce you. And you didn't let the bastards get you down. You got right into action. But I'd like to make sure that when we frame this conversation up, first it's to say hi. Do I hear your voice?
Hi, it is so great to be here. Thank you so much for highlighting Indiana. We get very excited about it.
Yeah, well, maps power action. It's sort of like what we're talking about, actually, even mapping out everything going around the country and taking back that power, and then how are we going to address it. What I loved when we talked about, first, for people in the room to understand what we really want to learn about our whole history of sort of what's going on with democracy. Why do we see so much lack of civic engagement or involvement? Each state is different. Why is that? David Pepper had talked about laboratories of autocracy. And then Indiana, there's a little storied history there. And with your group and why you actually, Mad Voters, came into being, I think we need to start there to take people on this little journey with us of why Mad Voters rose up, and a little bit about what we talked about, the red mapping and so on.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so at Mad Voters, we say our mission is to empower civic engagement. So we came about back in 2022 when Roe was overturned at the federal level. Indiana, sadly, was the first state to jump in and pass a near total abortion ban. And at that time, so many of us were new to activism and, testifying before the state house and everything else. And uh, the founders of Mad Voters really saw a lot of gatekeeping, not sharing the information. We were hoping there would be more of an instruction manual for how to become more civically engaged, and there just wasn't. So Mad Voters was created out of necessity to fill that gap and to really put the instruction manual together for people. We are very much focused on empowering just everyday Hoosiers to advocate for themselves, whether it's at the state house, like we saw with the redistricting fight, or running for office, and just everything in between. So, if you want to talk a little bit about red
Yeah.
mapping,
Well, let me just
so this is
stop
interesting.
there for
Oh,
1 second.
sure.
Right. I love it. No, and I love it because what we were identifying as activists in this room who really like to figure out what the heck is happening to voters or what's really reaching them. You had talked about voter apathy. And then I think that rolls really nicely into what that conversation is about red mapping.
Yep. So first of all, we get told all the time in Indiana that we're a red state,
Right.
and truly nothing could be farther from the truth. We are not a red state. We are very much a rigged state. And for proof, let's go back to 2008. Obama actually won Indiana. It's hard to even imagine such a thing
Right.
happening. But the reason that he won here was he excited voters, but also he campaigned here. He's an organizer at heart. He organized in Indiana. He had campaign offices. And, that we're told that we're a red state and like that could never happen, but it did. And
Yes.
then I also like to use the example in 2016, during the Democratic primary, Indiana voters actually picked Bernie Sanders over Hillary Clinton. So not only do we have Democrats, but we have a lot of progressive values in this state. So what happened after, like at the national level after 2008, after Obama won, the Republicans came out with what they called Project Red Map, which stood for Redistricting Majority Project, where they really went after the state houses so that they could gain control and control the redistricting and putting in the new maps and really gerrymander their way into cementing their power, because they knew that their ideas were becoming certainly less popular with people, and so the way that they could win would be rigging the system. And so that's exactly how it played out in Indiana. You can look at our maps. We our house, especially in the state, was always around 50-50. Sometimes it'd be democratically controlled, sometimes Republican. And as soon as Project Red Map happened and they gerrymandered our maps, we've been a super majority ever since. So
Yeah. And you were saying what I think it's interesting to understand when we talk about mapping power, looking at the map. Democrats had spent a lot of time, like you said, especially during the Obama campaign, we have talked about this kind of a lot amongst us and on the show a little bit, is that we get real excited. We're really, really good at winning big elections, not paying attention after he lost, that the Republicans went in the back smoky room in Columbus, Ohio, figured it out how to start rigging this campaign before the census to take the state house in Indiana, Ohio, all these states that they could take the legislature to create. Back in the day, we were worried about the constitutional crisis that would happen if they can get enough, right? And Virginia, we were able to stop that. But it makes voters then, our job is to get voters to be engaged. I love Mad Voters because you understand the apathy, what happens to people when they feel like their vote doesn't matter, why bother? Then you're trying to get them to understand. So this is a good segue into this campaign. Trump goes and asks for these states. Texas, will you give me these 5 states? I mean, come on, we've all heard this. Everybody like wake up, right? Give me 11,780 votes in Georgia. So then Indiana, let's start with your story and then how you were able to activate a network you already had.
yeah, so for us, it started last August, and it started with Trump sending JD Vance to
Oh,
Indiana.
JD. Ew, I got
Yeah,
to
exactly.
white. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
exactly. That's how we felt too, and that's how the people felt. So
Right.
back in August, we had less than 48 hours notice, and we kicked into high gear, activated our networks, and we started with a state house. We called it a sit-in rally. But we had a dozen speakers, hundreds of people showed up, and on that day, when I announced that JD Vance was in the building, the crowd just organically erupted into
Right.
boos that lasted for several minutes. And video of that booing of the vice president went viral. And I mean, literally, we got millions of views and shares. And my personal favorite, and this one's going on my resume, we even inspired a headline in The Onion. It was joking that, JD Vance was being booed by his own reflection in the mirror. So that felt good. That was amazing to get
Right.
national attention like that. We had national media reach out.
I
Suddenly,
love it.
people were looking at us again. So,
Well, this is a good segue to our roundtable, our Hoosier Center Court, get courtside with the Hoosiers. We want to bring in, I think, because now we're talking about the noise and how to break through. And so your group has been working with voters, so you're able to elicit now for a couple years a network that could respond to what was Trump was asking for. And then next, let's bring up Fennell Norton and get her in here because let's some courtside. We want to do a round table. Hello, Fennell. I think this is
Hello.
perfect. Yeah,
Yeah,
perfect segue.
this really is perfect because you've already talked. Hi, Amy. It's so good to see you. Um, so it's so good now to bring up Mary Noon. And so she is the brilliant Indiana-based political strategist and digital communications who really exports Fortune 500 marketing strategies to candidates and to the grassroots. And before you start to talk about this, Mary, Amy, one of the things that I remember you saying is that typically people would say, oh, you can't say that, oh, you shouldn't say that, and you can't do that. But Mary was very quick to let you guys know that yes, you can say that, and yes, you should do that. So, Mary, why don't we talk a little bit about these messages and this action that Mad Voters and Amy brought out, and how you actually took that organic messaging and
Mm.
spread it around everywhere.
Okay. Well, thank you, Amy. I cannot say enough. The work that Amy did was exactly what we need to happen. And the congressman could not cue up this conversation more perfectly because I honed in on what he said. The country is on our side. And what Amy did was demonstrate that Hoosiers were against redistricting by organizing that type of panel and bringing everybody together. It really demonstrated in a very loud way we have the voters on our side and let's push forward. Because in these types of movements, the reason why I could see this happening, it happened in Mandani's campaign. The reason why the national news gravitated onto what Amy did was because she took the reins and basically gave them a reason to look at us. If Amy didn't take that opportunity, it would have been a bygone. I go back to Indiana when the national, Amy, you'll remember this, when the NRA was on our floor when they had the conference here, and we were all blown away. We're like, wait a minute, why didn't our elected officials fight back on this? So, and these moments are given to us. If activists, as organizers, if we don't jump on it, we lose the momentum. So, step one, organizing an opportunity when it's given to you. It's the same thing with Minnesota. If we let this opportunity, let this budget bill go by, we're kicking ourselves in the butt. We have to use these moments collectively. So here you have Amy plants the seed, and because national news does not come on the doorstep unless they see something happening on the ground. So that viral moment was so pivotal, and we can create those. They happen organically, but that opportunity was really well positioned for the national news to go, hello, what's going on there? It happens all the time with candidates when they say, hey, I want to get in the national news. Until your local media picks you up, it's really hard to get to the next level. So that was really pivotal. So when we talk about the next stage of this like thing that's happening, that's when I was like, okay, let's get into the social media listening. What are our voters saying? So it hits the national news, everybody's talking about it. They were using certain language. We had the voters uncertain about what redistricting is. There was educational opportunities. The language they were using was rigged. unethical, transparency, happening behind closed doors. Those are all value sentiments that when I look back at my 2024 data of how voters feel about issues, they don't like violence, the swatting that happened. They don't like when things happen behind closed doors. They don't like it when they're told what to do from Washington. So this redistricting really represented a slap in the face to Hoosier values. So all those pieces started coming in place. And then what I saw also as an opportunity was to keep feeding David Pepper. He was bringing the conversation into the national. He was going on the Lincoln Project. He'd be like, okay, what's happening in the national? What's happening on the ground? I would be looking at the amazing stuff that Mad Voters was posting, shoving it up there because everybody wants to be in the know. So those guys like to be in the know and they like to know what's going on. And then finally, the other thing that we did was, and Amy, you can jump in on this one, was when elected officials feel supported, they get out front a little more. So what happened was I was really pushing down when David Pepper came to speak down Monroe County. He connected with Shelley Yoda to get her on to talk about national. Then 4 days later, it was about a week later, I was really pushing for JD Ford to get on there, and he did. So it was all these things that, from a strategist standpoint, when you step back, the moment gave us the opportunity. If we didn't have mad voters picking up that opportunity, all that other things would not been able to been built upon. So that's how that kind of sequence happened. And it always happens bottom up when you step back and look at it. And as Amy had said, we're not going to have this. And it really demonstrated from there forward that there's hope in Indiana when we come together and work together.
So let me ask a question, Mary. So this was all organic. It all happened, but oftentimes people are afraid, to be a little more provocative. How do you get it right without going too far, or is it really just being purely authentic about what's happening and how you're feeling about it?
Really good question. So every moment when I work with candidates, there's three things that propel a candidate forward. One is you have to have a good candidate.
Hmm.
Two, you have to have resources. And three, it's the political environment in the moment. Read the room. Right now, people want us to fight back because when I talk about things and I give them like the messaging, like guidelines, it can be an and both. We can step up to the line and want secure borders and talk about it aggressively and treat our fellow humans with humanity. So what right now voters really want that authenticity and they want people to fight back. The Democratic brand is bruised. It's a
Hmm.
heavy weight right now. But the way we get out of this is offer a really good vision forward. It's not just about fighting back. It's about projecting what's possible in the future. And that's where my Lululemon experience comes in, is everything was always about living in possibility, fighting for something that otherwise does not exist. And that's what the voters want. They want a new path forward. And the Democrats, when you talk about the establishment and the new Democrats and what's happening, the status quo is not going to win our next election. It's what's it's the new piece. We want something new. And what Amy demonstrated in a perceived red Indiana, that's not the truth because the narrative has been controlled by something else. That's the other component is when you talk about why this campaign was so successful. And Fennell, I'm really glad you asked that question of this congressman, is it was a long campaign, and Amy can talk about the sleepless nights, 4 months plus. That's why it also penetrated because everybody was singing from the same songbook and it
Hmm.
lasted long. We need these efforts. It's not one and done. It's not talking about education, close the book. It had a breadth and depth. When you talk about corporate campaigns, it's never for 2 weeks, it's always 8 to 12 weeks. And that's what we need our Congress folks to do and our senators to do is collectively start singing from the same playbook. And at the same time, they have to orchestrate a really well campaign. I'll end with this one final thing. It's like about 2 weeks ago. Does anybody know who Margot Martin is? You probably don't because she sits behind the scenes in the influencing world. So she's a young woman that follows around Trump everywhere. She's an influencer. Yeah, you're like, okay, I know who she is. And what she does at the end of the day, she prints out her 2-page PDF that goes out to 300 influencers, MAGA influencers. And they take the talking points of the day And then they humanize it to their audience, the Ben Shapiros and the Benny Johnsons. They put their spin and twist on it, has a thematic approach, and that is circulated in the ecosystem. We don't do that with the bite that they do that. So doing that in an individual state, individual community, and let it grow is something we so pivotally need. They invest in controlling the narrative.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm trying to say, what we've been talking about all this time, is having a narrative that is a narrative that we all can get behind and that all the messaging gets to flow from it. And what I keep wondering is, okay, so maybe Congressman Walkinshaw gets what we're trying to say, but at the end of the day, so let's put them aside. At the grassroots level, how do we do that? Or can we do that?
It's exactly what Mandanis did. So during his primary and afterwards, a bunch of us reached out to some of his campaign folks, like, okay, we saw this coming. What did you do? I think we know what you did. And step number one is Mandani, 8 months prior to his campaign, he went on a listening tour. That's how he found out what really mattered to the voters and how he framed his affordability with housing, busing, childcare, etc. So I go back to social media listening to answer your question. We don't need these big elaborate polls. I'll give you an example. So Heinz ketchup, we all know what Heinz ketchup is, right? So during the things are getting expensive. So those little it's about this size, the little Heinz ketchup packets you get at when you're getting French fries and a
Yeah.
hamburger, etc. What they saw on social media is runners and athletes were using these little packets for goos rather than spending $3.95 on a goo because they're getting expensive. So they picked up on that on social media, listening. So rather than, going, oh gosh, look what our consumers doing, they leaned into it and they reached out to Strava and Map My Run and they created running routes in the shape of Heinz ketchup. And they shipped the ketchup to, a diner here and diner, and they worked with it. So my point of that example is the information is there. We just have to know to look for it and to pull it out and then use their language to bring that grassroots up and speak their language and work with them.
Wow. Catherine, you got thoughts on this? And Amy, please jump in. You're on mute. Still on mute.
I know, I'm so captivated. I would like to hear from Amy actually, because I know that there's a lot of response. So please take it.
Yeah, where to begin? So one thing back in the beginning, it was kind of Mad Voters organizing that first event, but then we were part of a large and growing pro-democracy movement here in the state. And so there were a lot of different organizations that were engaged. But back in the beginning, we were kind of cautioned, like, oh, you'll never get anyone to care about redistricting, or that's not going to resonate with people. They won't understand it. Or oh gosh, don't call them cheaters. They don't like that. And so what we do? We went out and put up billboards and said, yeah, changing the rules mid-game is cheating, right? Call your representatives. And we had just conversations with thousands of Hoosiers during the 4 months, and more than anything, we wanted to raise their voices. And so we did a lot of education and helping people understand that this wasn't just redistricting or gerrymandering or politics as usual. We started having the conversation with people about, nope, this is an authoritarian consolidation of power. And we knew living in Indiana what it's like to have fascism at the state level. And so we're like, guys, we do not want this happening at the federal level. We really got to protect our elections. And so it was amazing to see the way Hoosiers just showed up. They
Yeah.
made those calls, they showed up to rallies, they wrote postcards. I mean, it was just amazing. And by far the overwhelming majority of people were just completely against this election rigging, is what we were calling it.
Right.
It's not what anyone in Indiana was asking for. This was President Trump asking. Unfortunately, we do have a crony governor who was happy to try to, do Trump's bidding. But thankfully, we had some senators who were willing to stand up and say no. And one of the reasons that they were able to do that is because the public was so loud in saying we don't want this, and in contacting their legislators and
Right.
going to town halls. And it was great when we actually had the session and they were discussing the bill. I was able to walk into a committee hearing with literally a stack that I had printed that morning at the library of 500 pages of testimony that just
Right.
everyday Hoosiers had given us, and I was able to drop that off. And so, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, Amy did this. Amy did." No, I helped
No.
get the voice of the people, and it was the Hoosiers. It was just the everyday people who made this happen.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about this is Hoosiers. Now I don't know if we have something like that, but that is that thing that connects people. They weren't Democrats or Republican or independents. They were Hoosiers. They were this group of people. And so I would just like to ask Mary. So in an instance where we're thinking about the work that we want to do,
That's what I wanted to say.
and
Go
even
ahead.
California, they really just focus on mostly Democrats. But so how do you think about that in terms of we're focusing on Democrats? What is a connecting point for us? And it is cheating, it is rigging, it is all of that. But how are you thinking about for us, for you guys as Hoosiers? Everybody's a Hoosier, but where we are, it's a little more, politicized.
Yeah, because you guys are going to have to defend the fact that you're going to go in response to Texas, right? So it's a
Hmm.
little bit of a different. So again, it goes back from the very beginning, control the narrative. You have
Hmm.
to answer why you're doing this. And a lot of times when people are orchestrating messaging, they forget to name the villain.
Hmm.
So, and we hear this from Anat all the time, the
Hmm.
values, right? Start with the values. We all believe in fair and equal representation. It's that collective. You just mentioned we use, the Hoosier, comparison, and then name the villain. You really have to educate really hardcore why people are doing it, why this is necessary, then offer the future. Like why we want a future with healthcare, childcare, accessibility to health, hospitals, rural hospitals. But that accessibility piece or that vision could look different in each district. What's going to trigger people to buy into your vision? So
Hmm.
it's really important not to think about this as one and done, but what matters in one section in Virginia is not going to matter in the metropolitan area, why they're going to buy into it. So you have to figure out what's the trigger to get people to buy into it. And those signals are right on social media. It's their angst that keeps them up at night.
Hmm.
Yeah. And, thinking about that is so important because with ours, and this is why we wanted this conversation seems an interesting, conversation because we have to talk to our voters about why we have to fight against tyranny and fascism and why we have to think about these midterms and what we could do and educate. So this is where the strat that we wanted to hear about your strategy because it is the same and owning the conversation. I just noticed yesterday the North Carolina were doing this. Okay. So Republicans aren't afraid to lie. So
No.
they take the mic and he was on there. Well, he was saying he was doing because Democrats are rigging the election. It's Democrats who are doing this. So he's already naming the villain. It's not Trump told me to do this. He's saying we have to respond to Democrats doing this to rig the election. So I think what most powerful thing we can do right now from learning for the Yes campaign, we're all fighting the same villain, right? It's the
Hmm.
person that's trying to rig those maps. And we have to respond with the tools we have in this moment. They're temporary because we'll
Yeah.
go back to that. And the vision is just we need to make sure in the midterms that we have this fair playing field, if you call it a playing field at this point, to do everything we can because the chaos to stop this madness and take back some lever of power to stop this, right? And then we could deliver these other things for people. But so I think any last wrap up on this, and because we'll have the after chat. Look at Patty already has her hand up.
Hands already
Hey,
raised.
patron Patty has her hand up. Thank you for being a patron, Patty. We love you. Yeah, so let's just like wrap this up a little bit and then we will continue that really strategic talk in the after chat. Go ahead,
Did you want
Mary or whoever.
Mary to
Mary
wrap it up?
last word and Amy last word, and then for now we'll do our wrap.
Okay.
And then we'll see in that, we'll wrap up the show and go the after
Yeah.
chat.
My last final thoughts is thank you for having us. I think one thing that came out of redistricting and in learning what you folks are doing and vice versa is we're better connected when we all learn from each other, because there's great nuggets in every single fight because we're in the same fight together.
Amy.
Yeah, I think our biggest takeaway from the redistricting fight is, when we come together and we fight back, we can win. And oh my gosh, what a victory, not just for Indiana, but for the whole country, that, Indiana, who we're told is just, the reddest of the red states. We said no to Donald Trump, and that's huge. And so that's the momentum that we are taking forward, into our legislative session that's happening now and into the 2026 elections. We can do this, but we have to come together and fight back.
Nice.
Don't let the bastards get you down.
All right. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Mary.
We'll
We'll see ya. All right.
Okay.
I had to say the word bastard one more time. Don't let bye, Mayor. We'll see you.
You did. So this is awesome, and Mary is a brilliant strategist, and so maybe she will work with us. So that would be really awesome. Yeah, her and Amy. This has been so powerful. I think everything has been powerful today. Hearing from Congressman Walkinshaw was really powerful.
Yes.
Understanding the strategy of Indiana is really powerful. And what I'll say with the few minutes that I have is I'm feeling really like sowing my oats right now, because Mark Elias said that we should be running everywhere. And, I say that everywhere about the Senate, that we shouldn't be talking about 51 Senate seats. We should be talking about how do we get to 60. So if we take the brilliance of Mary and Amy, maybe we can get those 60 seats.
And for me, I think what I love to learn from this group, and what this group, even in the big room, Democrats often fail by avoiding confrontation, playing nice idea and not fighting hard enough for their values. And I think Mary shows that with the strategy, putting those values first. And I was trying to say to James, creating that vision, like if you are just doing this funding, but you're not talking about the bigger picture, it gets lost in this sort of like one-off discussion. And
Exactly.
I think, and I think messaging strategies, social media listening, and for us, our grassroots power, we're like the mad voters, a similar infrastructure, similar coalition. How do we get to our voters? Because these are not ordinary times. This is not politics as usual. So we can't play by those rules.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. If we believe that we are in an existential crisis and our democracy is at stake and the House is on fire, then I do expect for our Congress and our senators to act like it's on fire and to do what they need to do to have a conversation with the American people to show that and demonstrate that. And we will keep doing what we're doing. But at the same time, this has to happen. This is not politics as usual. We are in a different place, and it should feel and look like it from the top of the house.
Yeah. And I want to say, as I wrap up, to remind people, next week, we're excited to have Kate Erkman on from the Theory of Chaos she wrote about. And we're excited to have Glenn Kirshner here. If you watch all his Substack on justice, we're excited to have him. And also, I hope people could stay for the after chat. But if not, we're going to be talking about the Yes campaign to say yes for Virginia, because this is going to be a great fight for the country, for the nation. And we will also be kind of talking about the Indivisible March 28th events and other events as we move forward and everything. I want to thank our guests for being here today. It's been great to hear from Mary Noon and also Amy Courtney of Mad Voters and James Walkinshaw, and having everybody in the room is great. And I want to say, don't forget, thank you to our patrons. If you're a patron, you're a badass. We love you. Thank you for supporting our show. Make sure you share.
Friday Power Lunch After Chat prides itself on being a community that is respectful of different points of view. We encourage them, but just a reminder, the After Chat is a place where we are courteous and respectful to others. We all know what that looks like. To be part of this community, each one of us commits to making this a safe and supportive environment. Let's get this After Chat started.